My name is Danielle, and I'm 33 years old. I remember that night so clearly, and honestly, I don't think it will ever leave me. Birthdays had never been extravagant in my family. We weren't the type for big blowouts or surprise parties. But we always had something. A dinner, a cake, a small gathering with laughter echoing through the house. So, when I decided to host my own birthday dinner this year, I thought it would be no different. I spent the entire day preparing. I wanted it to feel special, not just for me but for everyone coming. I decorated my apartment with soft fairy lights that glowed warmly against the walls. I laid out a long table with flowers in the center and polished the silverware until it sparkled. I even made some of my mother's favorite recipes, hoping it would make her smile when she arrived. The food smelled incredible: the roast chicken with rosemary, garlic mashed potatoes, and a chocolate cake that I'd baked from scratch. It wasn't extravagant, but it was thoughtful, and I couldn't wait to see everyone's faces when they walked in. I sent out the invitations weeks ago. My parents, my sister, her husband, cousins, even a couple of aunts who lived nearby. Everyone had said they'd be there. Nobody mentioned any conflict. Nobody gave me a hint that they wouldn't show up. At 6, I set everything out on the table. At 6:30, I lit the candles. By 7, I was pacing near the window, peeking out every time a car passed by, convinced it was finally them. I kept telling myself, they're just running late. Families are always late. But the clock kept ticking. 8 o'clock came and my phone buzzed. Excited, I grabbed it only to realize it wasn't a text from anyone coming to my dinner. It was a notification from social media. Curious, I opened it. And my heart dropped. There they were. My entire family, my mom, dad, sister, cousins laughing and smiling in a room filled with pastel balloons and baby gifts. They were at my niece's baby shower, a party nobody had told me about, on the exact same day as my birthday. Picture after picture filled my feed. My mom standing proudly beside my sister. My dad holding up a tiny onesie. My cousins raising glasses in a toast. Everyone looked so happy, so alive. As if this had been planned for weeks. And me? I was sitting alone in my apartment, staring at a table full of untouched food and a cake nobody would eat. I kept refreshing, hoping maybe it was an old post, maybe there was some explanation. But no. It was happening right then, in real time, and not a single one of them had bothered to tell me. My stomach twisted in knots. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they thought they could come to both events. Maybe they'd show up later. But deep down, I knew. They had chosen her. They had chosen the baby shower over my birthday. And worse, they hadn't even thought to include me. I sat down at the table, staring at the flickering candles on the cake. My eyes stung with tears, but I forced myself to smile, just for a moment, as I whispered, "Happy birthday, Danielle." Then I blew out the candles. The room falling silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. The food grew cold as I sat there, numb. I didn't eat. I didn't answer the phone when it buzzed again, this time with more photos and comments under them, my family tagging each other, writing things like, "Best day ever," and "So glad we were all together to celebrate this milestone." Except me. That was the moment it hit me. I wasn't really part of this family anymore. Not in the way I thought I was. They had moved on without me, and my birthday had been nothing more than a date on the calendar they could ignore. I stayed up late that night, staring at the empty chairs around my table. I thought about every birthday I had celebrated with them before, every moment I believed we were close, and I wondered, had I just been fooling myself all these years? The silence in my apartment felt heavier than anything I'd ever known. It wasn't just loneliness, it was betrayal. But that lonely night was only the beginning of a storm that would change everything. This wasn't the first time my family had made me feel invisible. As I sat in that quiet apartment after my ruined birthday, I realized something. This wasn't an isolated incident. It wasn't just about a baby shower scheduled on the same day. It was the pattern, the years of being overlooked, dismissed, and treated like I was always in the shadows of everyone else's lives. Growing up, I always felt like the spare piece in a puzzle that didn't quite fit. My older sister Clarissa was the golden child. She was smart, loud, charismatic, the type of person who filled a room just by walking into it. From the time we were kids, she was the one everyone noticed. She won spelling bees, she got straight A's, she was captain of her cheerleading squad. And me? I was the quieter one, the one who preferred books and art to crowds and spotlights. I wasn't failing or struggling, I did well enough in school, got into a decent college, worked hard, but my accomplishments never drew applause. They were just expected. I still remember one Christmas when I was 14. I had worked for weeks on a painting I made for my parents. I was so proud of it. I had spent hours in my room blending colors, sketching, redoing parts until it felt perfect. When they opened it, my mom smiled faintly and said, "That's nice, Danielle." But then Clarissa walked in with an announcement. She had been chosen as lead in the school play. Everyone erupted in cheers. My painting was set aside, forgotten under a pile of wrapping paper. That night, my gift wasn't even hung up, it was tucked away in a drawer. Moments like that stacked up over the years. When I graduated college, I was so excited, thinking finally I'd get my moment of recognition. But at the party, my relatives kept comparing me to Clarissa, who was already married, pregnant, and working a high-paying job. "Well, Danielle, maybe one day you'll catch up," one of my uncles joked, patting me on the back. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, but inside, it cut me like a knife. Even in smaller, everyday moments, I was the afterthought. Family dinners would revolve around Clarissa's stories, her job, her marriage, her baby. When I tried to talk about my own work or hobbies, the conversation would shift within seconds. My words hung in the air like they didn't matter. Over time, I started shrinking myself. Why fight for attention when I already knew where it would go? I told myself it was fine, that being invisible was easier than constantly being measured against someone I could never compete with. But even when my niece was born, I thought maybe things would change. I thought being an aunt would give me a role in the family, a reason to be included. Instead, my niece became the new center of the universe, and my sister basked in the glow of motherhood while I faded even further. Don't get me wrong, I loved my niece. I adored her little giggles, the way her tiny fingers wrapped around mine. But the way my family treated her milestones compared to mine was like day and night. When she turned 1, they threw a massive party, complete with a bounce house and catered food. For my 30th birthday, they handed me a store-bought cake at the end of a family dinner, almost as an afterthought. I kept telling myself I was exaggerating, that I was being sensitive. Families aren't perfect, right? Everyone plays different roles. Maybe mine was just quieter, maybe I wasn't meant to be the star. But then came that birthday, the one where no one showed up, the one where they didn't even bother to call before posting photos from a party I wasn't invited to. That was the night it all came crashing down. I wasn't exaggerating. I wasn't imagining it. I had always been the forgotten one, the invisible one. And this time, it wasn't just subtle neglect. It was a loud, undeniable message. You don't matter to us as much as she does. The truth hurt more than I could admit. Sitting there, I replayed every memory through a new lens. All the times I had been left behind, all the times my voice was drowned out, all the birthdays, holidays, and milestones where I was just there, but never celebrated. It was like my whole life had been preparing me for this moment of realization. I was always the background character in my own family story. The strangest part? Even after everything, a part of me still wanted to believe they cared. I caught myself staring at my phone, waiting for a message that never came. Maybe they'd text me an apology. Maybe they'd swing by after the baby shower with leftover cupcakes, pretending they hadn't forgotten. Maybe they'd at least remember that I turned 33. But nothing came. Not a call. Not a text. Nothing. I went to bed that night feeling like I was 10 years old again. The girl whose painting was tucked away. The girl who learned early on that she would never shine as brightly as her sister. Only this time, I wasn't a child anymore. I was an adult, and I had a choice. I didn't have to accept invisibility as my role forever. I decided that night I wasn't going to stay invisible anymore. I picked up the phone with shaking hands, demanding answers. The morning after my birthday, I woke up with puffy eyes and a heavy chest. The decorations from the night before still hung limply in my living room, mocking me. Plates of untouched food were stacked on the counter, and that chocolate cake sat there, half melted from the candles I'd blown out by myself. It looked so sad, like a monument to how little I mattered to the people who were supposed to love me most. I stared at my phone for what felt like hours. No missed calls, no texts, not even a belated, "Happy birthday." I thought maybe they'd reach out once the baby shower excitement died down. But there was nothing. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. My hands trembled as I dialed my mother's number. She picked up on the third ring, her voice light and cheerful, like nothing had happened. "Hello, sweetheart," she said. I swallowed hard. "Mom, did you forget what yesterday was?" Just a short one, but long enough for me to hear the truth in the silence. "Oh, Danielle, you know we didn't forget. We were just so busy with the shower. It was such a special day for your sister and the baby." Her words felt like knives. "So busy that you couldn't even send me a text? Or call? Or drop by afterward? I cooked an entire dinner for all of you. I waited for hours." My voice cracked. "You all promised you'd come." My mother sighed, like I was being difficult. "Danielle, you're an adult now. Birthdays aren't as important as they used to be. A baby shower, though that's a once-in-a-lifetime event, you have to understand." Understand? That my entire family chose a party I wasn't even invited to over my birthday? That they could smile and laugh in photos while I sat alone at a table set for 12? Before I could respond, my father's voice cut in. He must have been on speaker. "Danielle, you're overreacting. Your sister needed us. This is a big deal for her. You can celebrate your birthday anytime." I felt my throat tighten. "So, what you're saying is, I don't matter compared to her." "Don't be dramatic," my mom said quickly. "We'll celebrate with you another day." Another day. Like my birthday was some optional event you could pencil in whenever it was convenient. Like it wasn't important enough to remember when it actually happened. I couldn't stop the tears anymore. Do you even realize how humiliating it was? I saw all of you on Reddit, Facebook, every single one of you, together, and I was here alone. On my birthday. The silence on the line was suffocating. Then my sister's voice joined in. She must have grabbed the phone. "Danielle, seriously? You're making this all about you." I was throwing a baby shower for my daughter's arrival. That's a milestone for the whole family. "You had dinner, what's the big deal? You act like we abandoned you." My chest burned with anger. "You did abandon me. You knew it was my birthday, and you didn't care. None of you cared," Clarissa scoffed. "You're always so sensitive. You've always felt left out, and honestly, it's exhausting. Not everything is about you. Maybe if you weren't so self-absorbed, you'd realize that." Self-absorbed? The irony made me laugh bitterly. I had spent years being invisible, letting her take the spotlight. I had bent over backwards for this family, showing up for every event, babysitting her daughter when she needed a break, even covering for her when she messed up. And now, when I wanted just one day my day, I was told I was selfish for expecting to matter. I wiped my face roughly and steadied my voice. "You know what? Forget it. Forget the dinner, forget my birthday, forget me. You've made it very clear where I stand in this family." "Danielle," my mother started, but I cut her off. "No. I'm done pretending this doesn't hurt. I'm done being the invisible one while you all worship the ground," Clarissa walks on. "If my birthday isn't worth remembering, then maybe neither am I." The silence on the line was deafening. Nobody rushed to apologize. Nobody tried to comfort me. The only sound I heard was my mother's tired sigh, my father's mutter of overreacting, and my sister whispering something I couldn't make out. That was enough. I hung up, slamming the phone onto the couch as if breaking the connection could erase the years of disappointment. The tears came harder, after that. Not quiet ones, but heavy, shaking sobs that left me gasping for air. I curled up on the couch, surrounded by cold food and deflated decorations, feeling like I had just ripped open a wound that had been festering for decades. But buried in all that pain was something else: anger. For the first time, my sadness began to shift into something sharper. I couldn't keep living like this, begging for scraps of attention, waiting for people who had already decided I wasn't worth showing up for. That phone call was brutal, but it opened my eyes in a way nothing else could. My family wasn't going to change. They weren't suddenly going to wake up one day and treat me like I mattered. And if they weren't going to change, then maybe I had to. I decided I wasn't going to just cry about this, I was going to do something about it. For the first time in my life, I thought about cutting off my family completely. The day after that painful phone call, I walked into my kitchen and froze. The table was still set for 12. The flowers had wilted. The food had gone bad. And the cake sat there, hard and stale. It looked like a crime scene, except the crime wasn't murder, it was neglect. The death of my hope that my family would ever treat me like I mattered. I stood there for a long time, staring at everything. Then, slowly, I began packing it all away. The dishes went into the sink, the leftovers into the trash. With every plate I scraped clean, I felt the weight of years being lifted off my shoulders. This wasn't just about cleaning up after a failed birthday dinner, it felt like I was clearing away illusions. The false belief that one day, my family would suddenly see me. That afternoon, my best friend Lila stopped by. She had texted me earlier, asking why I hadn't answered her calls the night before. The second she walked in and saw the remnants of the party, her face softened. "Oh, Danny," she whispered, pulling me into a hug. "You did all this? For them?" I nodded, my voice cracking. They didn't come, not one of them. They were all at Clarissa's baby shower. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "On your birthday?" "Yeah." My laugh was bitter. Apparently my birthday isn't as important as new life. Their words, not mine. Lila shook her head, squeezing my hand. "You don't deserve this. You've spent your whole life bending over backwards for them, and for what? They don't appreciate you. Danielle, you don't have to keep letting them hurt you." Her words hit me hard. Because deep down, I knew she was right. I had been clinging to this idea of family, this dream that one day they'd see me, love me, celebrate me. But reality had slapped me in the face. That night, after Lila left, I sat alone with my thoughts. I replayed everything: the forgotten birthdays, the dismissive comments, the way my accomplishments were brushed aside while Clarissa was worshipped like a queen. And now, this final betrayal. What was I holding on to, really? A family that never saw me, never valued me? People who only remembered me when they needed a babysitter or someone to run errands? I pulled out a notebook and began writing. I listed every sacrifice I had made for them. Driving hours to babysit for free, taking time off work to help my sister move, showing up to every birthday, every holiday, every milestone, even when it meant canceling my own plans. I was always there for them. And in return? Silence. Neglect. A cold shoulder on the one day that was supposed to be mine. For the first time, I asked myself, what if I just walked away? The thought terrified me. Cutting ties with family isn't like breaking up with a friend, it's huge. It means changing holidays, birthdays, traditions. It means walking away from people who raised you, who share your blood. But then again, what had that blood tie really given me? Pain, disappointment, invisibility. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I wasn't really losing anything because in truth, I never had it to begin with. The next morning, I woke up with clarity. I drafted a message in my head, not one I'd send, but one that gave me peace. Something along the lines of, I love you, but I can't keep pretending this is okay. I can't keep showing up for people who won't show up for me. Instead of sending it, I simply stopped responding. I ignored the family group chat. I let their calls go to voicemail. I didn't comment on the endless stream of baby photos flooding social media. At first, it felt strange, like I was breaking some sacred rule. But with every hour that passed, I felt lighter. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for their approval. I wasn't checking my phone, hoping for a scrap of attention. I was free. Of course, that freedom came with fear too. What if I was making a mistake? What if one day I regretted it? But deep down, I knew what hurt more, staying in a family where I was nothing more than a placeholder. That night, I lit a single candle and sat by my window, staring at the city lights. It felt symbolic, like I was lighting my own path forward. No more chasing after people who didn't care. No more waiting in vain for recognition. I made myself a promise. I would start living for me. I would stop giving everything to people who gave me nothing back. And I would build a life so full and beautiful that one day, if they ever looked back, they'd realize exactly what they lost. I went to bed with that promise carved into my heart. But distancing myself from them would cause ripples I wasn't prepared for. The moment I stopped answering their calls, the messages started pouring in. It didn't take long for my silence to be noticed. At first, it was just a few missed calls and unread messages from my mom. I ignored them, telling myself I needed space. But by the third day, the texts started flooding in. My sister, Clarissa, was the first to lash out. "Really, Danielle? You're not answering anyone? You're seriously going to act like a child over this?" I stared at the words on my screen, my jaw tightening. A child? That's what she thought this was? After everything I had put up with, everything I had swallowed down, she thought I was throwing a tantrum because they skipped my birthday? It wasn't about the one night, it was about a lifetime. But of course, she couldn't see that. She never did. Then my mom chimed in, "Sweetheart, this is tearing us apart. Please don't be so stubborn. Family is family. We need to stick together, not push each other away. Family is family." I laughed bitterly when I read that. If family was supposed to mean love, respect, and showing up for each other, then what had they been giving me all these years? To them, family was just a word they used when they needed me to fall back in line. The guilt tripping didn't stop there. My dad sent a long message, scolding me for being selfish. He wrote, "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Your sister just had a baby shower, and instead of being happy for her, you're sulking. Do you want to ruin this happy time for everyone?" I wanted to scream when I read that. They really thought I wanted to ruin things? That I couldn't be happy for my sister? I was happy for her, but why did that happiness have to mean erasing myself completely? Why did celebrating her mean abandoning me? I didn't reply. I couldn't. The more I read their words, the more I realized that nothing I said would matter. To them, I would always be the problem. Then came the cousins, chiming in one by one. "Hey Danielle, your mom's worried sick. Don't you think you're taking this too far? Come on. We missed one dinner, it's not the end of the world." Missed one dinner. That's how they saw it. A single event, not the years of being overlooked, not the decades of silence whenever I needed someone. Just one dinner. The irony was suffocating. They had been silent when I was hurting. But the second I went silent, suddenly it was chaos. For a while I almost gave in. I almost picked up the phone, almost apologized just to end the tension. But then I remembered sitting alone on my birthday, staring at those chairs, waiting for people who never came. I remembered that hollow feeling in my chest, the tears I swallowed. The bitter taste of blowing out candles with no one there to clap or cheer. No. I couldn't go back. So, I stayed quiet. That's when the tone of the messages shifted from guilt to anger. Clarissa sent another text, this one dripping with venom. "You've always wanted to play the victim. You're jealous, Danielle, and it's pathetic. Grow up and stop making everything about you." I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. Jealous? Was that really how she saw me? As if my pain was just envy? As if I hadn't spent years supporting her, babysitting her daughter, celebrating her every milestone without a shred of resentment? The rage inside me boiled over. I typed out a furious response, but before I could hit send, I stopped. What was the point? They weren't listening. They never had. My words would just bounce off the walls they had built around themselves, walls decorated with Clarissa's achievements and my silence. Instead, I deleted the message and put my phone on silent. But ignoring them didn't stop the avalanche. They started leaving voicemails. My mom's voice cracked as she begged me to call back. My dad's tone grew sharper, warning me not to embarrass the family. Clarissa left a long message where she cried halfway through, accusing me of abandoning her. It was almost surreal. For the first time, they were the ones chasing after me, and yet, none of them said the words I needed to hear. Not once did anyone say, "I'm sorry." Not once did anyone admit, "We hurt you." It was all deflection, all manipulation, all about making me feel guilty enough to come crawling back. At night, I lay awake replaying their words in my head. My chest ached with anger and sadness, but underneath all of it was something else, a strange, quiet strength. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one doing the chasing. I wasn't the one begging to be seen. I was standing my ground. And the fact that it rattled them so much told me everything I needed to know. They didn't miss me. They missed the version of me who was easy to control, easy to guilt, easy to dismiss, and that version of me was gone. Still, a part of me wondered how far they would go. How long would they push? Would they ever stop? Or would the storm only get worse the longer I held my silence? What they didn't know was that I was planning something far bigger than silence. I decided to live a life that would make them regret ignoring me. After weeks of unanswered calls, angry texts, and endless guilt trips, something shifted inside me. At first, their words hurt. I'd replay them in my mind at night, letting the accusations burn into me like fresh wounds. But slowly, the pain began to fade, replaced by determination. I couldn't change my family, but I could change myself. I realized I had spent years building my life around them, dropping everything when they needed me, shaping my schedule to fit their events, sacrificing my own happiness so they could shine. And for what? For a lifetime of being invisible? For a birthday that no one showed up to? No. That chapter of my life was over. One evening, I sat down with a notebook and pen. The same one I had used to list out my family's neglect. But this time, I started writing a different kind of list. At the top of the page, I wrote in big, bold letters, "My new life." I broke it down into 3 categories: career, personal growth, and relationships. For my career, I promised myself I would finally stop holding back. I had been coasting at work for years, always doing enough to get by but never pushing for more. Part of me had been waiting for family recognition, waiting to feel good enough before I chased bigger goals. But that was over. I started volunteering for bigger projects at the marketing firm where I worked. I stayed late, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I wanted to prove to myself, not to my parents, not to my sister, that I was capable of more than they ever gave me credit for. In the personal growth column, I wrote, "Invest in myself." For too long, I had put myself at the bottom of the list, always prioritizing everyone else. Now, I was going to put myself first. I signed up for a painting class, something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. Standing in front of a blank canvas again, brush in hand, I felt a piece of myself returning, a piece I had buried under years of family obligations. I even hung my finished paintings on the walls of my apartment, something I never dared to do before. They weren't perfect, but they were mine. And they reminded me every day that I was capable of creating beauty. I also started taking yoga classes, not just for the exercise but for the peace it brought me. Every stretch, every breath, felt like I was reclaiming my body and my spirit. And in the relationships column, I wrote, "Build a chosen family." Lila was already at the top of that list. She had been there for me through everything, and I realized just how rare that was. She never made me feel invisible. She never made me feel like I was too sensitive or too much. With her encouragement, I began branching out. I joined a local book club, went to networking events, even forced myself to go out to dinners with coworkers instead of making excuses. It wasn't easy. At first, I felt like an outsider everywhere I went. But little by little, I started forming connections. People who saw me, who listened when I spoke, who actually cared about my presence. I also did something I had always been afraid to do. I adopted a dog. A scrappy little mutt from the shelter with big brown eyes and floppy ears. I named him Milo. From the moment I brought him home, my apartment felt less empty. He greeted me at the door every day with unshakable joy. And for the first time in a long time, I felt unconditional love. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself smiling more, laughing more. The heaviness that had followed me for years began to lift. I still thought about my family sometimes, especially late at night, but the ache wasn't as sharp as before. And here's the thing. The more I invested in myself, the more I realized just how much I had been holding back. I wasn't just surviving without them, I was thriving. Of course, I knew my family wouldn't see it that way. To them, my silence was rebellion. My independence was betrayal. And the stronger I became, the more I suspected they'd eventually come after me again, trying to pull me back into their orbit. But I was ready for that. Because this wasn't just about ignoring their calls. This was about building a life so full, so rich, that even if they never saw me, never celebrated me, it wouldn't matter anymore. I wasn't invisible, not to myself, not to my friends, not to Milo. And I knew, deep down, that one day, my family would notice. One day, they'd see me living a life without them. A life they never believed I could create. And they'd regret every single time they overlooked me. That thought didn't come from spite, it came from power. From finally realizing that I didn't need their approval. I smiled to myself as I closed my notebook that night, my list glowing under the soft light of my lamp. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone to show up for me. I was showing up for myself. But little did I know, my growth would soon threaten them. They tried every trick in the book to drag me back. The stronger I grew, the more silent I became, the more frantic my family seemed to get. It was almost comical, in a way. For years, I had been chasing after their attention, desperate for scraps of recognition. But the moment I stopped, the moment I chose to invest in myself, suddenly I was the one they couldn't let go of. It started with my mom. Her tone shifted from scolding to sweet almost overnight. "Danielle," she said in one voicemail, her voice quivering, "I miss you. Please don't shut us out. You're still my daughter, and I love you. I know the shower upset you, but can't we move past it?" I wanted to believe her, I really did. But then, in the very same message, she added, "Your sister's been asking about you. She says you're making this harder on her than it needs to be. Danielle, can't you just forgive her? She's going through a lot with the baby." And there it was, the pivot. It wasn't about me, or the pain I had carried for decades. It was about making things easier for Clarissa. Again, I didn't respond. Then came my dad. His voice firm and commanding. "Danielle, enough is enough. Family loyalty comes first. You don't walk away just because you're upset. You think you're proving a point, but you're only hurting yourself. You need to call us back before this goes too far." Loyalty. That was the word he always used when he wanted to control me. But loyalty, I realized, should go both ways. Where had their loyalty been when I sat alone on my birthday? Where had it been all the years I was invisible? I let the voicemail delete itself without saving it. Next, Clarissa herself reached out. She texted late one night, "I don't know what you want from me. Do you want me to apologize for being happy? For having a baby? I can't help that people care about me. Maybe if you stopped isolating yourself, you'd have more too." My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. She wasn't apologizing, she was blaming me, twisting the knife, making me feel like it was my fault for not shining brightly enough to compete with her. I didn't answer. The attempts didn't stop there. Suddenly, my cousins started reaching out, people who hadn't spoken to me in months. "Hey Danielle, we should catch up sometime. I heard you're mad at the family. Don't let it ruin everything." Even my aunt, who usually kept to herself, called me one evening. She said, "Honey, your mom is worried sick. You know how families are, sometimes things don't go perfectly. But blood is blood. Don't throw that away. I sat there listening, my heart pounding, because it was so clear now. None of them wanted to actually acknowledge what they had done. None of them wanted to sit in the discomfort of admitting they had hurt me. All they wanted was for me to cave, to slide back into my old role, the quiet, compliant Danielle who never complained, who accepted crumbs and called it a meal, but I couldn't do it anymore. So I stayed quiet. That's when the manipulation escalated. My mom called again, this time crying, full-on sobbing into the phone. Danielle, I can't sleep at night knowing you're angry with us. Please, sweetheart, don't do this. Don't cut yourself off. We're family. We'll always be family. Her tears tugged at my heart, but I noticed something. Not once did she say, I'm sorry. Not once did she acknowledge the birthday, or the years of being ignored. It was all about her discomfort, her sleepless nights. I set the phone down and walked away. Then came a different tactic, guilt through the baby. My sister sent me pictures of my newborn niece, tiny and swaddled in pink blankets. She attached a note. You'll regret missing this. She's growing fast, and one day she'll ask why you weren't around. Do you really want to explain that you skipped out on her childhood over a birthday dinner? I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me ached. I did want to see my niece. I did want to be in her life. But the thought of stepping back into that toxic cycle just so I could hold a baby made my stomach twist. Because I knew how it would go. I'd show up, they'd pat me on the back, and within minutes, I'd be invisible again while everyone cooed over Clarissa and her child. So I didn't reply. The silence seemed to drive them crazy. Messages piled up, calls came in at all hours, some angry, some desperate, some passive-aggressive. It was like watching them cycle through every strategy, anger, guilt, shame, pleading just to get me to break. And through it all, I felt something I'd never felt before, power. For once, I wasn't dancing to their tune. I wasn't shrinking myself to fit their expectations. I wasn't letting their words control me. Instead, I focused on my own life. Work was thriving. My boss had started noticing my extra effort, praising me in meetings. Lila and I planned a weekend trip together, something spontaneous I never would have done before. Milo, my little dog, had turned into my constant companion, and just his wagging tail when I came home made me feel more love than my family ever had. But I also knew one thing for certain. The harder I pulled away, the harder they'd fight to pull me back. Families like mine didn't give up control easily. And I was right. Because just when I thought they might finally let me go, I got a late-night call that changed everything. A crisis hit the family, and suddenly, they needed me. I got a late-night phone call I wasn't expecting. It was just past midnight when my phone started buzzing on the nightstand. I had been asleep, curled up with Milo at my feet, when the sound jolted me awake. At first, I thought about ignoring it. My family had been calling non-stop for weeks, and I wasn't in the mood for another guilt trip. But something about the way it rang again and again made me uneasy. Finally, I picked it up. The screen showed, Mom. My finger hovered over the red decline button, but something in my gut stopped me. I swiped to answer. Her voice was frantic, trembling. Danielle, oh thank God you answered. We need you. Your sister's in labor, but there are complications. Your father and I, we can't drive at night. Please, can you take us to the hospital? For a moment, I just sat there in silence. My heart was pounding, my brain scrambling. Part of me wanted to say no. Part of me wanted to remind her that I wasn't their chauffeur, that I wasn't the daughter they only remembered when it was convenient. But another part of me, the part that still had compassion, the part that couldn't ignore someone in pain, couldn't hang up. I threw on a sweatshirt, grabbed my keys, and told Milo I'd be back soon. The drive to my parents' house was quiet, the streets empty under the glow of streetlights. My chest was tight the entire way. When I pulled up, my parents were already outside, pacing. They rushed to the car the moment they saw me, climbing in without a word of thanks, just urgency. My mom kept wringing her hands, whispering prayers under her breath. My dad stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. The drive to the hospital felt endless. My mom filled the silence with details I hadn't asked for. Her water broke early, the doctor said. The baby's heart rate was dropping. They might have to do an emergency C-section. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. As much as I wanted to stay angry, the thought of losing my niece or my sister twisted my stomach. I didn't want anything bad to happen to them, no matter how hurt I was. When we arrived, my parents bolted inside, leaving me in the parking lot. I sat there for a moment, staring at the hospital doors, debating whether I should follow. Part of me thought about just driving away. But in the end, I went in. The waiting room was chaos. Family members I hadn't seen in months were pacing, crying, making frantic phone calls. And then there was Clarissa's husband, pale and anxious, sitting with his head in his hands. Nobody looked at me when I walked in. Nobody said hello. It was like I was invisible all over again, even though I had been the one to get my parents there. I sat in the corner, silent. Hours passed. Nurses came and went with updates, each one vague. She's stable. They're monitoring closely. The baby might come sooner than expected. At one point, I caught my mother glancing at me. Her eyes were red. Her face weary. For a fleeting second, I thought she might walk over, say thank you, maybe even apologize. But she just turned back to my father and gripped his hand tighter. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a nurse walked in with a smile. She's fine. The baby's fine. Both are healthy. The room erupted in cheers. Everyone hugged, crying tears of joy. My parents rushed to Clarissa's husband, hugging him tightly. My cousins clapped each other on the back. The relief was palpable. And me? I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, watching the celebration like I was on the outside of a glass wall. Eventually, my mom turned to me, her eyes soft. You should come meet your niece. I stood up slowly, my heart racing. Part of me wanted to hold that tiny baby, wanted to feel connected, but another part of me hesitated. Because deep down, I knew this moment wasn't about me. It never was. Still, I followed them down the hall to Clarissa's room. She was propped up in bed, pale but smiling, cradling the baby in her arms. The room was filled with flowers, balloons, and gifts. Everyone circled around her like she was a queen. When she saw me, her smile faltered just slightly. Oh, you came. Her words stung. Not, thank you. Not, I'm glad you're here. Just surprise. Like I didn't belong. I nodded. I drove Mom and Dad. She looked down at the baby, then back at me. Well, do you want to hold her? I stepped forward cautiously, my arms trembling as she placed the tiny bundle in my hands. My niece's face was scrunched, her little breaths shallow and steady. For a brief moment, my heart softened. She was innocent. She hadn't chosen any of this. I whispered, "Hi there," and she stirred slightly, her tiny fingers brushing against mine. But before I could even take it in, my mom's voice rang out. Okay, pass her along so everyone else can hold her too." And just like that, the baby was taken from my arms and passed around the room. I stepped back, invisible once more, forgotten in the corner. As I watched everyone gush over the baby, laughing and crying, I felt something heavy settle in my chest. I had come when they needed me most. I had shown up, even after everything. And still, I was just background. On the drive home, my parents were quiet. Not once did they thank me for coming. Not once did they acknowledge that I had saved them from missing the birth. It was like my presence was expected, like it didn't matter unless it served their needs. That night, when I finally crawled into bed, I stared at the ceiling for hours. The image of holding my niece, even for those brief seconds, stayed with me. But so did the memory of how quickly she was taken from my arms. I realized something then. My family would never change. No matter how much I gave, no matter how many times I showed up, I would always be invisible to them. That night confirmed something I'd been scared to admit all along. I finally understood they would never change. When I got home from the hospital, I thought maybe the weight of the night would hit me gradually. That maybe it would take days for me to process everything that happened, but it didn't. The truth crashed into me the moment I closed the door behind me. They would never see me. Not then, not later, not ever. I had given them everything. I had shown up. For every crisis. Every milestone. Every event. And even after cutting ties. Even after weeks of silence. I had still caved when they needed me. I drove them to the hospital. I sat with them in the waiting room. I held my niece in my arms. And still, it wasn't enough. It wasn't about me. It never had been. I dropped my keys on the counter and sank onto the couch, Milo curling against me as if he could sense the storm raging inside. I buried my face in his fur and let it all out, every ounce of pain I had carried for years. Every frustration, every desperate wish that maybe, just maybe, they'd treat me like I mattered. The sobs racked through me until I couldn't breathe. My chest hurt, my throat burned, and for the first time, I wasn't just crying over what they'd done to me recently. I was crying for the little girl inside me who had been ignored, brushed aside, and made to feel invisible her entire life. All those memories came flooding back. My art projects pushed aside while Clarissa's trophies took center stage. My graduation party, overshadowed by news of her engagement. My birthdays treated like chores, while hers were full-blown celebrations. The endless maybe next time promises when I asked for support, always followed by silence. It wasn't about one birthday dinner. It was about a lifetime of being invisible. And now, holding my niece for those fleeting seconds before she was whisked away, I realized something else. Nothing I did would ever make me visible to them. I could drive through storms, sit in waiting rooms, babysit, cook, sacrifice, none of it mattered, because in their eyes, I would always be second place. For years, I had clung to hope. I had told myself that if I just tried harder, loved harder, gave more, they would finally see me. But that night, staring at the ceiling through tear-blurred eyes, I let go of that hope. It was killing me. Lila came over the next day. The second she saw me, she wrapped her arms around me without a word. I cried against her shoulder, my voice muffled. I don't know why I keep doing this to myself. Why do I keep expecting them to care? She pulled back, her eyes firm but kind. Because they're your family. You've been taught your whole life that family is supposed to love you. But Danny, love isn't supposed to feel like this. Love isn't supposed to make you feel small. Her words sank into me like truth I had always known but never admitted. That evening, after she left, I sat with my journal again. I wrote down everything I was feeling. At the top of the page, I scribbled, "They won't change." And under it, I wrote, "They only call when they need something. They never apologize. They don't celebrate me. They dismiss my feelings. They make me feel guilty for wanting respect." By the time I put the pen down, my hand was shaking. But for the first time, I felt clarity. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't a temporary rough patch. This was the truth of who they were and who they had always been. The next few days were quiet. No calls, no texts. I thought maybe, finally, they had given up. But instead, the silence made me realize something even more painful. I didn't miss them. Not really. What I missed was the idea of family. The dream of having parents who celebrated me, a sister who valued me, relatives who cared about my life. But that wasn't who they were. It was who I wished they were. And holding on to that dream was destroying me. That week, I made a decision. I would stop waiting for apologies that would never come. I would stop chasing after recognition that would never arrive. And I would stop letting their neglect define my worth. It wasn't easy. Every time I thought about cutting them off completely, my chest tightened. The word family echoed in my mind, weighted with guilt. But then I remembered blowing out those candles alone. I remembered sitting in that waiting room, invisible. I remembered the years of being told I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too selfish for wanting the bare minimum. And I realized I couldn't keep living like that. That night, I stood in front of the mirror and whispered to myself, "You are enough. With or without them." Milo wagged his tail as if he understood. I didn't know what the future would look like without my family in it. Holidays, birthdays, milestones, they would all feel different. But for the first time, I felt something stronger than fear. I felt free. But the real test was yet to come when they confronted me publicly. They invited me to a big family dinner, and I knew it was a trap. It had been weeks since the hospital incident, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe things would settle down. I had drawn my boundaries, I had taken space, and I was finally beginning to feel lighter. But then, out of nowhere, the invitation came. My mother called one afternoon, her voice unusually bright. "Danielle, we're having a family dinner this weekend. Everyone's going to be there. Your father and I think it's time we all sat down and healed." The word healed made my stomach twist. Families like mine didn't use that word unless they wanted to sweep things under the rug. Still, something inside me was curious. Part of me wanted to see if maybe, just maybe, they were finally ready to hear me out. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The night of the dinner, I stood in front of my closet, my heart racing. Milo sat at my feet, watching me as if sensing my unease. "What do you think?" I whispered to him. "Should I go?" He tilted his head, and I laughed softly. "Yeah, I know, it's going to be a disaster." But I went anyway. The restaurant was buzzing with chatter and clinking glasses when I walked in. My entire family was already seated at a long table in the center. The moment I approached, the room seemed to shift. Smiles appeared on their faces, but they were strained, artificial, the kind that didn't quite reach the eyes. "Danielle!" my mom exclaimed, standing to hug me. I let her, but the embrace felt hollow. My father nodded stiffly, and Clarissa gave me a quick smile before turning her attention back to the baby carrier beside her chair. I sat down, trying to steady my nerves. For a while, the dinner went smoothly. The conversation circled around Clarissa's baby, her first smiles, her sleeping patterns, her doctor visits. I sipped my water quietly, listening, invisible as always. But then, right after the appetizers arrived, my sister leaned forward, her voice carrying across the table. "So, Danielle," she began, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Are you ready to stop being mad at us now?" The table fell silent, all eyes turned to me. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. "Excuse me?" Clarissa tilted her head. "You've been ignoring everyone for months. You missed holidays, you skipped family dinners, and all because you're upset about your birthday? Don't you think it's time to let it go?" My chest tightened. "This isn't about one birthday, Clarissa, and you know it." She rolled her eyes. "Here we go again. You always do this, you turn everything into some huge tragedy where you're the victim. I'm sorry if people care about me and my baby, but that doesn't mean nobody cares about you." My father cleared his throat, adding, "She's right, Danielle. You've been making this situation worse than it needs to be. Family means compromise. You can't hold grudges forever." My mom nodded quickly. "We're here tonight to move past this, honey. Can't we just enjoy each other's company?" I looked around the table at their faces, expectant, impatient, dismissive. They weren't here to listen. They weren't here to understand. They were here to shut me up. To smooth things over without ever acknowledging what they had done. And for once, I didn't shrink. I set down my fork and spoke clearly, my voice steady. "Do you know what it felt like? To sit alone on my birthday, at a table set for all of you, while you celebrated without me? Do you know what it's like to spend your entire life being invisible in your own family? Every milestone, every achievement, overshadowed by someone else? That's what this is about. Not one dinner. A lifetime." The table went quiet. My mom's eyes darted away. My dad's jaw tightened. Clarissa smirked like she thought I was being dramatic. I continued anyway. "You've all made me feel like I don't matter. Like I'm just extra. I've tried, for years, to earn your love and respect. But I finally realized I'll never get it. Because you don't want to give it. You want me to stay quiet, to play my role, to disappear. Well, I won't anymore." My voice cracked on the last words, but I didn't care. The truth was spilling out, and it was too late to stop. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then my sister leaned back in her chair, her smile sharp. "Wow. So this is what you wanted? A scene? Do you feel better now?" I clenched my fists under the table. "No, Clarissa, I don't feel better. but at least I finally said it out loud. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses rattle. Enough. If you can't accept your place in this family, then maybe you don't belong in it at all. The words cut deep, but they didn't surprise me. In fact, hearing them out loud almost felt like confirmation of everything I already knew. My mom reached for my hand, her voice pleading. Sweetheart, he doesn't mean that. We just want things to go back to normal. Normal. Invisible. Forgotten. I pulled my hand away. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. My heart pounded, but my voice was calm. Thank you for dinner, but I'm done. And before anyone could stop me, I walked out of that restaurant, leaving the weight of their stares behind me. They told me if I couldn't accept my place, I didn't belong in the family at all. In that moment, I knew it was truly over. When I walked out of that restaurant, my heart was pounding so hard I thought I might collapse right there on the sidewalk. The cool night air hit my face, and I realized my hands were shaking. I wasn't sure if it was from anger, grief, or relief, probably all three. I stood there for a moment, staring up at the glow of the streetlights, listening to the muffled voices of my family drifting out through the restaurant's windows. They were probably already talking about me, labeling me the problem, the difficult one, the selfish one. But for once, I didn't care. I walked to my car with my head held high, slid into the driver's seat, and sat in silence for a long time before finally turning the key. As I drove home, my chest felt heavy, but not with the old familiar ache of invisibility. No, this was something different. This was finality. By the time I stepped into my apartment, Milo was there to greet me, wagging his tail like he had been waiting all day just for me. I dropped to my knees, burying my face in his fur. It's just you and me now, I whispered. And that's enough. The next morning, I made the decision I had been avoiding for months. I blocked every single one of their numbers. My parents, my sister, my cousins, the entire family group chat. I muted them on social media, unfollowed their accounts, and deleted their pictures from my phone. It felt brutal, like tearing off a bandage that had been stuck for years. But it also felt cleansing. My phone, once constantly buzzing with manipulative messages, was finally silent. And in that silence, I felt peace. The first few days were hard. I'd pick up my phone out of habit, expecting to see notifications. I'd find myself rehearsing responses in my head, only to remember I didn't have to respond anymore. I'd walk past old photos on my shelf and feel a sharp pang in my chest. But slowly, those feelings began to shift. The pangs of loss turned into breaths of freedom. The silence turned into space for my own thoughts, my own voice. And every time I looked at Milo, every time Lila showed up with takeout and a bottle of wine, I was reminded that I wasn't really alone. I had people and creatures who loved me without conditions, without comparisons, without making me feel invisible. That week, I also started reorganizing my apartment. I took down the old family photos on the wall, the ones where I was always standing at the edge of the frame, half smiling while Clarissa shone in the center. I replaced them with my paintings. Bright, colorful canvases that filled the room with life. My life. I realized something important as I hammered those frames into place. I wasn't erasing my family, I was reclaiming myself. For so long, I had defined my worth by their approval. I had begged for scraps of attention, hoping they'd see me, hoping they'd love me the way I needed. But they never did. And now, finally, I didn't need them to. One evening, as I journaled by the window, Lila called. So, she said with a teasing tone, how does it feel to officially be family-free? I laughed softly. It feels lighter. Scary, but lighter. She was quiet for a moment, then said, you know, Danielle, sometimes the family we're born into isn't the family we're meant to keep. You can build your own. And from what I see, you already are. Her words stayed with me long after we hung up. Because she was right. Family wasn't just blood. Family was the people who showed up, who made you feel seen, who celebrated your existence just because you were you. And I already had that in her. In Milo. In the new friends I was beginning to make. Of course, there were moments of doubt. Nights when I lay awake wondering if I'd gone too far. Holidays when I imagined my family gathered around a table, laughing, while my chair sat empty. Sometimes I thought about my niece and wondered if she'd ever know me, if she'd ever ask why her aunt wasn't around. But then I remembered sitting alone on my birthday, blowing out candles in silence while my family celebrated without me. I remembered every ignored achievement, every dismissive comment, every guilt trip, and the doubt faded. Because I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't walking away from love. I was walking away from neglect. I wasn't abandoning them. They had abandoned me a long time ago. The day I blocked them wasn't the day I lost my family. It was the day I finally accepted the truth I never really had them to begin with, and that acceptance set me free. But the best part? I wasn't just moving on, I was thriving. With my family gone, I started building the life I always wanted. The weeks after my final goodbye felt strange at first. There were moments where the silence was so loud it almost scared me. For years, my phone had been a lifeline to my family, even if it was filled with guilt trips, dismissive comments, or endless conversations about Clarissa and her baby. Now it was quiet. But slowly, I realized the silence wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. I threw myself into my job with a new kind of energy. At the marketing firm, I volunteered for projects no one else wanted. I pitched bold ideas, and I started taking risks. For the first time, I wasn't holding back out of fear of failing or disappointing anyone. I wasn't looking over my shoulder, wondering if my family would be proud of me. I was doing it for me. And it paid off. Within months, my boss called me into her office with a smile. "Danielle," she said, "your work has been incredible lately. I'd like to promote you to project manager." I could barely breathe. A promotion. Recognition. The kind I had been craving my whole life, not from my family, but from my own hard work. I left that office grinning so wide, strangers on the street smiled back at me. That night, I celebrated the way I wished my birthdays had always been celebrated. Lila and a few friends from work came over. We ordered pizza, opened a couple bottles of wine, and laughed until our stomachs hurt. There were no guilt trips, no comparisons, no invisible shadows, just people who loved being around me. In those moments, I realized something powerful. I had always been capable of being celebrated. I had just been in the wrong room, surrounded by people who refused to see me. Outside of work, I began pouring energy into hobbies I had abandoned years ago. Painting, for one. My apartment walls slowly filled with color as I hung up canvas after canvas. When people visited, they asked where I bought them, and I proudly said, "I painted them myself." Lila encouraged me to join a local art group, and though I was nervous, I went. To my surprise, I found myself surrounded by people who not only admired my work but wanted to learn from me. We exchanged ideas, techniques, and encouragement. For the first time in forever, I felt like my creativity mattered. I also traveled. Nothing extravagant at first, just weekend trips to nearby towns with Lila. Exploring farmers' markets, hiking trails, and little cafes tucked into quiet corners. But soon, I planned something bigger. A solo trip abroad. I booked a ticket to Italy, a place I had always dreamed of visiting but never dared to because I was too busy showing up for everyone else. Walking through cobblestone streets in Florence, sipping coffee at outdoor cafes, and sketching in front of the Duomo, I felt alive in a way I hadn't since childhood. Nobody there knew my family. Nobody there knew I was the forgotten one. To them, I was just Danielle, a woman exploring the world on her own terms. Back home, Milo continued to be my anchor. Every time I came through the door, his tail wagged like I was the most important person in the world. And maybe to him, I was. That unconditional love healed parts of me I didn't even realize were still bleeding. Therapy helped too. I finally found the courage to sit down with a professional and unravel years of neglect. At first, it was painful digging into the wounds of my childhood, admitting how badly I had craved my family's approval. But with time, therapy gave me tools. Tools to set boundaries, tools to value myself, tools to recognize that love without respect isn't love at all. And the more I healed, the more I flourished. I hosted small dinners at my apartment, inviting the people who actually cared about me, friends, co-workers, neighbors. The first time I blew out candles surrounded by them, I cried, not from sadness, but from overwhelming joy. It wasn't a huge party, but it was everything I had ever wanted. People clapping, smiling, celebrating me just for being me. As months turned into a year, I realized something profound. I didn't just survive without my family. I thrived. I was healthier, happier, and more confident than I had ever been when they were in my life. Sure, there were still pangs of sadness sometimes. I thought about my niece often, wondering what she'd grow up hearing about me. Maybe my sister would paint me as the difficult aunt who walked away. Maybe one day my niece would come looking for answers. And if she did, I'd tell her the truth. That I loved her, but I had to love myself too. Because the truth was, I couldn't keep pouring from an empty cup. And walking away from my family wasn't abandonment, it was survival. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, Milo curled at my feet, I realized something. For so long, I had been waiting for my family to give me the life I wanted. But I didn't need them for that. I was building it myself, piece by piece, choice by choice, with people who actually valued me. And for the first time, I felt completely, unapologetically, free. But the story didn't end there because my family came back, once again. Months later, they showed up at my door, pretending nothing had happened. It had been almost a year since I last spoke to my family. In that time, I had rebuilt my life piece by piece. My career was thriving, my walls were covered in my own paintings, and my birthday had finally been celebrated the way I always dreamed, surrounded by friends who loved me. I thought the silence from my family was permanent, and truthfully, I had made peace with that. But one rainy Saturday morning, there was a knock at my door that shattered the quiet I had grown used to. When I opened it, I froze. My parents stood there, umbrellas dripping, with strained smiles plastered across their faces. And behind them was Clarissa, holding the baby, now a chubby little toddler with bright eyes and curly hair. "Danielle," my mother said warmly. Like we hadn't gone months without speaking. "We thought we'd stop by and see how you're doing." I stood there, gripping the doorframe, my heart racing. "Why now?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. My father shifted uncomfortably. "It's been too long. We miss you." Clarissa chimed in, bouncing her daughter on her hip. "And she deserves to know her aunt, don't you think?" Her words hit me like a punch. Deserved? Where was that sentiment when they left me alone on my birthday? Where was that urgency when I sat in the hospital waiting room, invisible while they passed the baby around like I didn't exist? I opened the door wider, motioning them inside. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed answers. They stepped into my apartment, looking around at the paintings on the walls, the cozy furniture. Milo wagging his tail happily. My mom smiled faintly. "You've made a lovely home here." I crossed my arms. Again. "Why now?" There was silence for a moment. Then my father spoke. "We want to move forward. Too short to hold grudges." I almost laughed. Grudges. That was the word they chose? To them, everything I had been through was just me holding a grudge, like a spoiled child refusing to share. Not years of neglect, not a lifetime of invisibility. Just a grudge. Clarissa set the baby down, who toddled toward Milo with squeals of delight. For a moment, I softened, watching her little hands reach for his fur. She was innocent. None of this was her fault. But then I looked back at my sister's face, and the wall inside me went back up. My mom leaned forward, her eyes glassy. "Danielle, we made mistakes. We should have been there for you more. But we can't change the past. All we can do is move forward as a family." Her words were close to what I had longed to hear, but they still felt hollow, rehearsed, like they were reading from a script meant to pacify me. So I asked the one question that had burned in my chest for months. Why now? Why not after my birthday? Why not after the hospital? Why not after the family dinner when you told me I didn't belong? The room went quiet. My father cleared his throat, but no words came. Clarissa looked down at her daughter, avoiding my gaze. My mother finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Because we thought you'd come back on your own, but you didn't. And we miss you. I stared at her, my jaw tight. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe they had finally realized what they had done. But deep down, I knew the truth. They didn't miss me. They missed the version of me who was easy to control, who accepted being invisible, who never demanded more. I shook my head slowly. You don't get to disappear from my life and come back when it's convenient. You don't get to erase years of neglect with a few kind words. If you really wanted me in your life, you would have shown up when it mattered. Clarissa finally spoke, her voice sharp. So what, you're just going to cut us off? Forever? You're going to punish us for one mistake? My chest burned with anger. One mistake? Clarissa, it wasn't one mistake. It was a lifetime. You've always been the star, and I've always been the shadow. I begged for your approval, your attention, your love, and you gave me nothing. You all gave me nothing. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. For once, she had nothing to say. My mom's eyes filled with tears. Danielle, please, we just want to be a family again. I took a deep breath. Family isn't just blood. Family is showing up. Family is love and respect. And if you can't give me that, then no, I don't want to be family again. The silence that followed was heavy. My father's jaw tightened, my mother's shoulders slumped, and Clarissa clutched her daughter protectively, as if I were the threat. I walked to the door and opened it. You should go. My mom hesitated, tears spilling down her cheeks. We'll try again, sweetheart. You'll see. I shook my head. No. This was your chance. And you wasted it. They shuffled out, their footsteps echoing in the hall. I closed the door firmly behind them, leaning against it as tears streamed down my face. Not tears of regret, but of release. Because I knew, finally and completely, that I didn't need them anymore. That was the day I truly set myself free. I used to think family was everything, but now I know better. It's been over a year since I closed the door on my family for the last time. At first, I thought the silence might crush me, that the absence of their voices, their presence, even their criticism, would leave a hole I couldn't fill. But what I didn't realize was that the silence wasn't empty at all. It was space. Space to breathe, space to grow, space to finally become the woman I was meant to be. This past year has been the happiest of my life. Not because it was perfect, far from it, but because it was mine. Every choice I've made, every step I've taken, has been for me and me alone, and that's something I never had before. When my birthday came around again, I braced myself for the usual ache, the familiar weight of disappointment. But instead, I was met with laughter, warmth, and love. Lila organized a small dinner with friends, complete with balloons, music, and a homemade cake. We toasted to another year of growth, and as I blew out the candles, tears filled my eyes. But this time, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude. Gratitude for the people who showed up for me. Gratitude for the family I had chosen, not the one I had been given. At work, I've continued to rise. That promotion turned into a full-on leadership role, one that I never thought I'd be brave enough to take. My team looks to me for guidance, and for once, I feel respected and valued for what I bring to the table. Every time my boss congratulates me, every time a coworker thanks me, I think back to all those years of being overlooked and I smile. Because now, I see myself clearly. My art has flourished too. I've sold paintings, displayed them in local galleries, and even started teaching a weekend class for beginners. Watching people discover the joy of painting, the same joy I had rediscovered, fills me with pride. My walls are no longer decorated with reminders of invisibility. They're alive with color, with proof that I matter, that my voice matters, even if it's painted on canvas instead of spoken aloud. Travel has become a passion. Italy was just the beginning. I've seen the Eiffel Tower sparkle at night, wandered through bustling markets in Morocco, and stood on cliffs in Ireland with the wind in my hair. Each trip reminds me that the world is bigger than the tiny box my family kept me in. Bigger than their judgments, their neglect, their silence. And then there's Milo, my loyal companion through it all. He's grown from a nervous little shelter dog into a confident, playful partner who makes me laugh every single day. Sometimes I think he rescued me just as much as I rescued him. But more than all of that, the most important thing I've gained is peace. I no longer wake up with that knot in my chest, wondering if I'll ever be good enough for them. I no longer scroll through social media, searching for my family's approval in the form of likes or comments. I no longer sit in rooms where my voice doesn't matter. Because I've built a life where I am enough. Do I think about them sometimes? Yes. There are still nights when I wonder what my niece will grow up knowing about me. Maybe she'll hear only one side of the story. Maybe she'll never understand why her aunt wasn't around. And that hurts. But I also know this. If she ever comes looking for me, I'll tell her the truth. I'll tell her that I loved her, but I had to love myself too. And as for my parents and my sister, I've forgiven them, but I haven't forgotten. Forgiveness, I've learned, doesn't mean letting people back into your life. It means releasing the grip they once had on your heart. And I've done that. The Danielle who once sat alone at a birthday table, waiting for a family who would never come, no longer exists. In her place is a woman who celebrates herself, who surrounds herself with love, who refuses to settle for invisibility. I used to think blood was everything, that no matter how badly they hurt me, I had to stay. But now, I know better. Blood might make you related, but it doesn't make you family. Love does. Respect does. Showing up does. And my life is full of that now. So when I blew out my candles this year, I didn't wish for my family to come back. I didn't wish for them to finally see me. I wished for exactly what I already had: freedom, joy, and the strength to keep building a life that's mine. Because the best gift I ever gave myself was freedom.